Well, hello, Shannon. It's wonderful to be here. So Shannon and I have known each other for a number of years. Shannon is
Mhm.
a graduate of our neuroscience and transformational coaching program, and she's also a B above license holder. So, Shannon, this is neuroscience consciousness and what might be an awkward conversation about the racial divide in America. And so I'm so delighted for you to be here. So I want to read a little bit about from your bio so that people know who you are and why we thought that your insight and wisdom is going to be so helpful in this conversation. So Shannon is founder and CEO of Matter of the Heart and developer of the Resilience Training Program. She specializes in teaching law enforcement professionals to be resilient and more effective in their professional and personal lives. For the past decade, Shannon has researched countless methodologies, seeking the techniques and tools to mitigate the effects of stressful experiences inherent to policing to be healthy, strong, and thriving community. Combining her expertise in resilience building and wellness with 30 years of law enforcement work, she teaches others how to prepare for, manage, and work through adverse events. She's a former lieutenant with the California Highway Patrol. Shannon initially discovered her passion for officer well-being as a peer support member and assisted in developing and delivering the department's Not One More Suicide Prevention Program. Shannon is a certified neurotransformational coach, emotional
Mhm.
freedom technique practitioner, heart math coach, trainer, and certified hypnotherapist. And she has also developed a resilience program called Resilience to the Fourth Power. Welcome, Shannon. It's wonderful to be here. And so, before we go into our questions, I want to find out a little bit more about this resilience program that you call Resilience to the Fourth Power. What is it?
Well, first of all, Ursula, I want to say thank you. It's so good to be with you and to see you face to face. So I love this opportunity to be here. So the resilience to the fourth power. So I really was looking for what can we do to help our officers and our first responders to not just come in and take care of them after something happened or after they've had so much trauma or stress, that now they're actually experiencing the effects of post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress injury. And so it really became apparent to me, especially after my own life-threatening event that I experienced several years ago, that you really have to be prepared beforehand.
Mm,
You have to be proactive in building your resilience. And so I put it under the formula of like a propeller. Think about a propeller, and if you have one blade on it, the first propeller on that the first blade on that propeller is, personal responsibility and resilience. You
mm,
have to take your own responsibility, right? You have to be proactive in your own resilience, because your agency or organization can give you as much training as they want. And if you don't make that commitment to yourself, it's wasted.
yes.
The second propeller, so that one propeller is going to be kind of wonky, right? That one blade is going to be
Yeah.
wonky. Then if you put a second blade on there, so you have a two blade, it's, I call it resilience preparation. And so with the resilience preparation, it's like we all carry, in law enforcement, we talk about carrying a backpack, and that backpack holds all those experiences, both on the job and before our job, right? We all come with these different experiences. So
Yes.
how do you heal that? How do you help take those bricks out of your backpack and everything before a big event happens?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the third, and so that's going to spin better. The third blade is resilience restoration. So we know things are going to happen. We know we're going to have those incidents that are overwhelming and stressful and traumatic. And what do you do with that? Being proactive immediately after it happens, so that you can help your brain and body process that experience, and it gets processed the right way so it doesn't become post-traumatic stress
Yes.
injury. for you.
Yeah.
And so a 3-bladed propeller spins pretty good, right? That would be really efficient. And then if you put the 4th blade on there, which I call it organizational role,
Mm-hmm.
and the organization can be the agency, it could be family, it could be community, but what kind of culture of resilience is that organization creating and building? So
Yeah.
that's
No, really,
resilience to the 4th power.
yeah, no, I really love that and really see how important each of those blades are as we're looking at resilience and well-being. Well, talk about well-being. And so, it is June 16, 2020. We have just had a lot of protests, some peaceful, some violent, in regards, so as a result of the deaths of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis. And it has really become a very powerful conversation about what is happening in the United States. It has had a ripple effect in other parts of the world, but I really want to focus our conversation about the United States. So when you think about the 7 levels and the below the line aspects of the 7 levels, hopelessness, fear, and frustration, what takes you below the line as it relates to, race in America?
So I'm going to present more from the law enforcement perspective and how I relate and connect to that, because obviously for me, the fact that it is 2020 and we're still having this conversation about race relations and stuff is definitely frustrating, right? It's like, why have we not solved this problem yet? So that's a conversation that is connected and a little bit separate on the other side from where I go with law enforcement around that. So seeing everything that's happening and the conversation that's happening and especially how it relates to law enforcement and what law enforcement is facing out on the lines in the protest, in addition to the polarization of people and
Yes.
taking that.
Yeah.
It was really actually for a few days there, I was down in that level of hopelessness around that. It's like, this is a conversation we've been trying to have for a long time, all the times I've been training in leadership and inside law enforcement. And it doesn't feel like we're any further along when this happens, right? So it's kind of like that hopelessness, like not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And then I shifted a little more to frustration because I see people are operating out of fear, fear in where they're standing, but also the misinformation, kind of like the name calling or the finger pointing and all of that stuff really takes me to a place of frustration because we don't have all the right information out, I would say, on all sides.
Yes.
So people are coming from a place of not having all of that and responding from that place below the line.
Yeah, no, I really, really like what you're saying because, knowledge is power, they say. And I think it's so easy to point the finger. I think this is a sort of a very natural human reaction when we are either afraid or especially when we are angry. We want to get that energy off and out somewhere and put it somewhere. And it's easy then to point a finger, wherever it's wanting to be pointed to. So I can really see that. So that's sort of below the line. And actually your comment on, man, it's 2020 and this is the conversation we've had for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years. I had an interview last week for someone who said exactly the same thing. Only for him it's been even longer. It was very interesting. He got married the year that Martin Luther King was killed. So he's in his middle 70s. He said, we've had this conversation for 50 years and nothing has changed. So
Right.
it's really, I can really see people going like, what is going on? Why have we not made any headway? Now, above the line, I think there's also lots going on. So what do you see in regards to above the line conversations that are taking place, and what do you see there?
So, stepping up above the line, what I really see a lot of is people who are at level 4, right? People who are at that level of courage, because we're not really sure yet how that's going to work, but we're willing to take that step. People are looking at for opportunities to take that step.
Yeah.
And I see people moving up into that level of engagement. What can we do? Starting to have those conversations, what can I bring to the table? So that when you focus on that, that is encouraging, because there's a lot of awareness and there's a lot of people who are really saying, how do we bring this together? We have to have something that encompasses everything. So how are we going to do that? And that's encouraging.
Yeah, I really love that. I mean, when you think about part of the description of the level of courage, the willingness to make a stand against previously held limiting beliefs.
Right.
And I really think that is what's happening, is willing to make a stand, looking at the limits and the fear and frustration that we have encountered in the past, and making a stand for changing that. That really is encouraging. So really, there is this interesting question here that I have here, that's sort of interesting on many levels, and it is, what is it to be truly above the line about race in America without taking a spiritual bypass? And so what we mean by a spiritual bypass is sort of like, oh, it's all good, it will all work out, we're all one on the greater level.
Right.
So how can we really stand in that? Yes, on a soul level, we are created all one, but on a human level, that is clearly not the case. So how can we be above the line and include all that without sort of making it all go away or making it all nice?
Right. Well, so one of the things I always challenge my officers and first responders when I'm talking to them, and that's even before this, right? Because they have this frustration that's there because they want things to be different in their communities and in the work that they do. And I always ask them, what are you listening to? What are you feeding your brain? What are you continuing to put in there? And I, liken how our brains, with their confirmation bias, will seek out the algorithms that confirm what they believe, right?
Yes.
So if an officer believes that everybody doesn't like them or doesn't support them or whatever, then that's the information they're going to look for, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
to me, being above the line is being proactive, right? We're back into that being proactive part. And it's like, what do you do to bring differing information in? If you're finding yourself leaning in one direction and being really, staunch in that belief, what are you looking at that challenges that?
Yes.
Not that you have to change your position, but you don't want to be stuck in that neural pathway that doesn't allow you to see something else. So for me, it's that proactiveness of, where do I want to be and what do I need to do to keep myself there? Because it's going to take action. And it's going to take the willingness to have a conversation. It's going to take the willingness to get uncomfortable on everybody's side. And so what can we do to be proactive in being able to stay there and not slipping down into that blame, guilt, all of that stuff?
Yeah, no, I really love what you're saying, and you're already answering, in parts my next question. What do you see about the brain in terms of this conversation? And I really love what you're saying about the confirmation bias. It's really, we prime our brains to look for something, whatever we are primed to see, we see. And just for our listeners, it's sort of like a couple of years ago, I bought a red car, and I thought I'd bought really a car with a very different color. I thought most cars are white and black. And then, I kid you not, I parked the car on a car park, and the red car was surrounded by red cars, and it was like, how did I never ever saw that there are so many red cars? There were literally like four right in the vicinity of where I was parked. And that really is priming your brain. Now that I have a red car, I have a much better awareness that, my brain is primed to see red cars now. And so it is seeing that. So the
Right.
confirmation bias, that priming the brain, if you are wanting to see danger, something that is bad or adverse, then when your brain is primed, it will look for it and it will find it. So I really, really like that, and being aware of that, that confirmation bias is hugely, hugely important. So if we were to walk the ladder, the 7 levels, from hopelessness right up to synchronicity, um, you've touched on hopelessness and fear and frustration. We touched on courage a little bit already in your previous comments. So what would you say about engagement, the conversation that would need to happen from engagement in regards to this, the racial divide?
So, with the level of engagement, action really creates more power, right? Taking that, so the courage is that place of being willing to kind of stand against. Engagement is like, what's that action that you can do? How can I contribute to this? How can I contribute to the conversation? So it looks like, for me to be in that state of engagement, kind of going back to that willingness to check yourself. What am I looking at? What am I giving myself? Am I looking at other things? And then what am I willing to share? And I'm going to be a little bit of that, compassionate side right now, but what am I willing to share in love with, with understanding that my experience is not your experience and your experience is not mine. So we have to have that empathy of that. So the engagement, that being proactive about what your action is that you're going to take.
Yeah, and I really love what you're saying. Also, that relates to looking at assets and strength, which is really part of engagement, and really looking at what are the strengths and the gifts that I have that I can bring. What are the gifts and the strengths that you have that you can bring? And I love this comment about empathy. We say everything increases the more above the line we are. Everything increases, and so our ability to have empathy for other people also increases the more above the line we go. And so, back to your comment about resilience and self-care and looking at community for all that, I can really see how that, the blades, how important that is not only for resilience, but also to tap into empathy for other people. Right. And then at innovation, which is really this very powerful level of knowing that there is ego involved, setting aside personal agendas. Oh boy, that must be hard as it relates to this topic.
Yeah, well, I think, just as humans, that can be a challenge for us, right? To set that ego aside and that agenda. But the innovation is also that level of win-win. This is what you need, and this is what I need. And how do we not make this a win-lose or lose-lose? How do we make this a win-win? How do we work together? And I always love the description. It's that thinking outside the box. What don't I know? What don't I understand? What other information should I be looking for? And being able to do that, then I believe opens up our mind to that possibility of like, hey, what if I don't know this all? What if I don't have all the answers and I really have to look somewhere else with you to find the answers that work for both of us?
Yeah, I love that. And this really describes the level of innovation really well, because I think at that level, we really ask more questions than believing that we have the answers. And I think, from various interviews and things that I have read, people have really been stressing that this is such a complex issue. This is such a complex challenge that cannot be Band-Aid. It's not a Band-Aid solution. It is a system issue, and it's so complex. So really coming at it from this, I don't have the answers. I have more questions than answers. It's really this wonderful place of innovation where we look to each other for questions and answers and solutions, and not pretending that we have any of the answers.
Right. And, Ursula, I think this is where the ego part or the agenda part comes in, because what you just said about it, this is a systems problem, and to focus on one component at the expense of the others, this is a huge integrated systems problem that, it's going to take so many players at the table to
Yes.
come in and be willing to have that conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. And that excites me, because I think that maybe we're at that place that we can have that conversation, or at least start that conversation, getting it going, that we're looking at everything else that's impacted and not just our perspective from there.
Yeah, and I think it's also an opportunity for people like you that work with the neuroscience and with the 7 levels, and you've been doing work already with various agencies and speaking at conferences, but maybe this is the moment where the door gets opened to these deeper conversations that are not just surface and a quick fix, but really looking at how can we transform rather than just fix something.
Right.
So that is certainly,
yes.
that is a hopeful aspect of it. Last but not least, synchronicity. I mean, that really is sort of like, it almost makes me laugh, because synchronicity is really about it is a place of unconditional love. It's a place of creating magic, but it's also, says in the description, knowing deeply that what is inside creates the outside. So what's your take on that?
So my take on that, and I have given so much thought to this, right? So I'm going to go back to, I think this relates to everybody, but I'm going to go back to the law enforcement perspective, in that when officers choose this career, when they feel called to come into this career, they come in with a heart that they want to make a change, right? They come in that they're going to have, and maybe sometimes it's idealistic that they're going to make this change, and they can't do it alone. And so when we start to have the disappointment, or we start to have that unresolved trauma, or we feel like, this speaks for everyone, we feel like we don't have the support that we need, then we begin to create that wall, I guess, maybe, or that, where we have a hard time touching showing, I would say not touching, because I know that they feel very deeply, but showing that empathy, right? And so moving up into that level of synchronicity and understanding what's in is what without really kind of goes back to that resilience, preparation, and restoration, right? It's like making sure that you're putting the good stuff in, making sure that self-care is happening, because when you have stuff good inside of you that you're creating, then you can bring that out for people, and meeting people where they are, being able to have that level of empathy. But when you are holding a lot of trauma, and you're holding a lot of stress, or you're holding a lot of frustration, fear, whatever it is that has you below the line, then you can't connect to people in the way that you want to. You can't connect and understand. So, we always talk about it and be above that, getting up into 7 and staying in 7, it's a challenge for us just as human beings and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a great place to go if you want to say, I want to reach out to people with empathy and take care of them. And that's the whole circle, it's taking care of our communities, it's taking care of our police officers, it's taking care of, so
everybody. I really like that also from a brain perspective, the more stress chemicals we have in the brain and our body, the less we are able to function. And over long periods of time, and you were speaking to this, when they first come, freshly minted out of the academy, all enthusiastic about making a difference, their brains and their bodies have not experienced the stress, the disappointment, the frustration. But, if they then do that for years and years and there is no restoration, there is no healing, I can really see the impact that it has on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So last but not least, so what is one piece of advice you have from your own background and experience?
So the biggest encouragement that I would put out there is things are changing. I've seen it changing. Nothing in bureaucracy changes very fast. And my advice, a lot of the conversation, especially if you look at the 6 pillars of former President Barack Obama's policing in 21st century, they have pillars that are listed out. And I think you would find when you go through most of the law enforcement agencies that many of them have already started to incorporate that. And officer wellness is the last pillar, right? Officer wellness, taking care of the officers, helping them with the mental health and dealing with what they do, as well as their physical health, is the last pillar. And I would say that's foundational. That needs to be the first thing in front, because we need to have really integrated, healthy people to go out and do the job that they have to do as law enforcement.
Yes.
And when we have them working in a place of being effective, they can do their job much better. I think they do their jobs great. We have things that go wrong, but we can help them support so much more. And so I think shifting that perspective, that let's take care of the people that we need to go out and do this so that we can support them in that. And I think that would benefit everyone to a greater extent.
Yeah, no, I really see it. I mean, their job is community building. I mean, it is, bridging the gap. And to see a police officer, to see law enforcement as support, as really as the people that keep us safe, rather than something that we need to resist and be afraid of, that really would be a huge shift, for many people. It was interesting. I before COVID, I took my granddaughters, who was 2.5 and 5, to have. I had coffee, and they had hot chocolate. It was in the winter, and a police car stopped at the front, and they came in and got their coffee, and they came to the table where the girls were and gave them stickers and waved, and the girls were, as little as they are, they were sort of like, ooh. And I said, these are police officers. These people are here to keep you safe. They're here to protect you. That is their job. And so, I mean, when you talk about vision, my vision would be that everyone, no matter what background, race, whoever they are, that would look upon law enforcement as, these people protect me. Wouldn't that be a wonderful place that we could work towards?
Yeah, it would be a wonderful place, and it would be a much safer place for everybody.
Yes.
It would be a much safer. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
you say that, and it's funny because the image that I have that comes up in my mind, my son is a sheriff's deputy, and he's a big guy. He's 6'3" and 240 pounds. And of course he puts his uniform on, and he looks even bigger with all the stuff that they wear today and everything. And then that juxtaposed against him holding my 3-year-old granddaughter, who just adores her daddy, and that sweetness that's there. And, every single one of them, that's, we need to look at every person as the human being that they are. Yeah. And so if we could move to that and have that, where you said everybody feels safe and understanding that the law enforcement is here to protect them, and the law enforcement can feel safe and connected to their community, we would have a whole different world to live in.
Yes, we absolutely would. So, yeah. Well, I will leave you with the last word. Thank you so much, Shannon. This was very, very useful. I hope that this interview series that really shows so many different perspectives from our community, the 7 Levels Be Above community. We wanted to shed light on, different people that are engaged in some way or another within this conversation, and just really hear, what is your perspective. So this was very helpful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ursula. I appreciate it so much. And I love Be Above and what we learn about the brain and the 7 levels and what we can share. And I think this is just could be a tremendous platform for the conversation to happen where it needs to happen. And that's in the community as a whole.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, sweetie. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.